So we have a treat for you guys today. We have James DeVitt here, who is our trader extraordinaire, right? We have Lee Duffy, who's here every week. And you guys get to see the predictions, but you don't get to see the discussions between those two about all the trading. And when we talk about all those profits, this is where that comes from, partially, because James is also very good. So let's get into their discussions. We can look at that and show you a little bit of behind the scenes on it. So let's go. So the entire world wants to know what the euro US dollar is doing. And guess what? We have some insight into that. So let's have a discussion with these two guys about that and hear what they have to say about it.
So James and I had a long debate last week about what we're going to do in terms of the trading around euro US dollar, how we're going to present that information. And this discussion is about what we were actually thinking at the time. So James, we saw this last time. Do you remember what we were saying?
Yeah, so we had a look at this chart, and I wasn't sure if the euro was going to go down. We weren't sure what the news was going to be like regarding CPI and the effect on interest rate hikes on the dollar and so on. And there were two possible paths for the euro to take. One was the red path, which is that downward arrow, which was a possibility because of the chart pattern that was being shown there, or the upward arrow, which would take the price up to that purple line, which is the 10-year downward sloping trend line. And I wasn't too sure about it. In fact, I was completely ambivalent. It could have gone either way, and we didn't know what the news was going to be like. But we had some insights from Ghost, which you shared with me, and I took the long side of the trade. And today we've got halfway up that, well, a quarter of the way up through that green path already, thanks to the ideas that came out through the hologram projections that you shared with me. So perhaps you can talk a little bit about that too.
I can, but before we get into that, James, would you agree that the head and shoulders pattern, which is clearly marked on this image, is now invalidated?
Yes, absolutely. Because we've now broken above that pattern, and at least above the right-hand shoulder, and I think above the head of that pattern as well now. So that pattern is null and void. These patterns are there. They look pretty. They're always nice to look at and quite good to debate, but they don't always work out. And sometimes the market will take the opposite side to the pattern. There are a lot of robots and algorithms which actually see these patterns as well and will negate the pattern purposefully to break the pattern, stop out positions and move it outside the position. And I think that's what we saw, including the news that we got from the States with inflation supposedly having come down significantly down to the 3% level.
And you just don't believe it, right? But we're not going to go there.
You don't believe it either, I'm sure. But that's the number we got. The market believes it.
Okay.
That's all that needs, though. That's all that matters, really.
I'm the one in the US and I go to the grocery store. I don't believe it.
I don't believe it here either. Right. So if we go back to what we were saying last week and looking at the projection that we had, we were at the time of recording, we were at these red lines here at price 1.085. And that was on the 5th of July. And in the Twitter post that we put on, we showed that it would bounce along these lines here and then go straight up. And that's accompanied by the words we've got here. Somewhere around here is a strange movement long, possibly 110 to 111. And today we hit 111. And I think you'd agree, James, that is a classic straight line up, really, from where we were last week.
Yeah, beautiful. So we were able to get long on the euro at around about that area where you called that. And I've just literally taken my trade off about half an hour ago at your target level. Whether it's going to continue or not, I'm not sure, but that's not what the problem is right now. The problem is to grab some profit, to take advantage of the market move that was foreseen. And we can assess what the market looks like tomorrow and then decide what position to get into. And I think what's exciting is that the technical pattern that I see aligns very closely with what you're seeing from MKTRedLine. So perhaps you could show us what MKTRedLine says and then perhaps align that up with what you see on the charts that I showed you earlier with my ideas.
And it just so happens that we do a weekly prediction. And there we go, right? Go for it, Leigh.
Okay, so this is MKTGhost Enterprise, and what I'm seeing here on the information that's being provided is that overnight we're going to be very steady. It's hit this 1-1 level, it's going to be very steady. I would expect price to come off of this high tomorrow after it should go up a bit first and then come down a bit around sort of 3-4 o'clock UK time. It might come down to 1.106, but the theme is further longs all the way up to 1.1288, which is in this area here on the charts. So I suspect by the time we're here next week, we'll be at 1.11288 area. And I think price after that will be reflected down. It will come down again, but I will quantify that next week. That's what we're seeing on MKTGhost.
And James, as a trader, how does that help? Aside from the obvious.
It helps tremendously because my idea is that we'll probably get up to 1.16 at some stage in the next few weeks. And that's probably one ledge along the way up. The market doesn't move in a straight line. It moves in ledges, creates a ledge, falls back a bit, moves up higher. And I think the ultimate target is 1.16, which is the underside of that long-term downward sloping trend line, which is where I'd expect the euro to perhaps fall down quite dramatically after that. And I think that aligns with your ultimate target on MKT as well, doesn't it, Leigh?
It does. And I have drawn a dotted line in red. And that is the maximum spike we've seen on the long wave. And it was predicted a long, long time ago, but that is the highest point we've seen on the product at 1.1626, somewhere around there. And the white line that's coming down is your 1.16 from the other chart, that long-term downward trend line that you have articulated. And isn't it interesting how they all look like they're coming together around the end of this chart here, which is predicting that may happen around mid-August.
So you got technical analysis and MKTGhost matching up for a future price. Definitely something to pay attention to.
Yeah, so if you look on the weekly view, this is about 1.16.
Okay, and that's the trend line going back to 1.16. And that's the trend line going back to when? Really at the peak of the euro, somewhere around...
Goes back all the way to 2008, July 2008. Wow.
So it's interesting that such a long-term trend line going back more than a decade, 17 years, coincides with what MKT is showing us in the moment today. I think that's fascinating.
That is definitely.
It's uncanny. And you know what's really interesting about this stuff? It does it all the time.
All right, so that's Euro US dollar. And now we have predictions going out a few weeks along with our weekly predictions. So you guys have an idea of where we think things are going. And Leigh has been posting some interesting things on Twitter about a couple other pairs. And James has been doing the same on his YouTube. So let's talk about those. So what about dollar yen?
So I posted on Twitter a number of yen predictions with Aussie yen, Canadian yen, and dollar yen. And those predictions we put onto Twitter. James, you took a look at them. What did you make of them?
Yeah, so these were problematic pairs because they just kept on rallying. The yen kept on getting weaker across the board. And there was talk of intervention by the Bank of Japan, but no one knew when it was going to happen. And the timing of getting these pairs short, the Australian dollar yen, US dollar yen, CAD yen, etc., as you mentioned, was very difficult to tell. But we all knew it was going to happen. And we were able to look at MKT and see that there was divergence in the risk index between the way that money flows were going and the way those currency pairs were going, which enabled us to get short at the right time, which we did. And we made some really, really good profits on those trades as well and closed those out about half an hour ago. Also, pretty good day for us in the market. And on top of that, we were able to correlate that with things like gold and a couple of the other pairs that we were trading and get some profit on those as well, because there is some correlation between gold and silver and the MKT information that we get too, as you will have pointed out in previous videos, I think.
So using the MKT risk index, you were doing that?
Yeah. So Leigh had put some info up on Twitter. I put some videos up on the yen pairs. In fact, we were looking at several yen pairs, especially the Australian dollar yen and the US dollar yen. And we were short those right from the top, just about within, I suppose, 24 hours of the top being reached. And we were shorting those pairs right there and closed them out about half an hour ago. Well, it's about an hour ago. Put some really good profit. So we're just waiting for some predictions on those to come through from Leigh again too. I've got some ideas. I think we're going to see a bit of a bounce in those and they'll carry on. But I always collaborate with Leigh and see what MKT says and we work out a plan. And that's the beauty of it because I've got some experience and some technical knowledge and Leigh's MKT stuff is super interesting. And particularly when they agree with each other, then it's a goer for sure. And we know that the market is the trade direction that we've chosen is almost certain to be correct, which is awesome.
So what was particularly interesting about that situation is on the Australian yen, we saw it peaking first on Ghost on the long wave, ahead of dollar yen and other pairs. We were able to then go to the MKT risk index and look at the correlation between the risk index and those individual pairs, and we could see a really big divergence. That gave us the confidence to assume that on this occasion, Australian yen was leading the others in terms of the fall, and that the other information that we were getting from the long wave are about future predictions. So we were able to ascertain where it was going to go, where it was going to drop to before we start to reach a bouncing point. And that enables us to take the profits and sit out and wait and review.
So I'm expecting a pullback in all of those yen pairs. In other words, a short rally before the trend continues. The divergence on MKTRedLine still appears on the charts, which shows us that those markets are going to carry on moving lower. In other words, the yen's going to carry on strengthening. So we have to wait for that pullback to occur first because the market doesn't travel in straight lines. And I have some technical ideas on the charts where that pullback might reach. And we'll be able to get the timing from MKTGhost along with the direction that we already have from the MKTRedLine index. So they work hand in hand. And I'll be able to determine the technical levels of my charts as well. So we've got three things that work together, which will enable us to get into the trades at the right time, which, as I said earlier, I think is fantastic.
Using all the tools together, that's the way to do it. All right, so that's information on quite a few pairs, some good predictions and where we think things are going to go. Make sure you check out Twitter. As we said, Leigh's on there. He's throwing out predictions. And again, as I always say, he's a nice guy. Talk to him. He'll talk back. And make sure to visit James's YouTube channel, Arcus FX, and check out what he's doing because he is in all kinds of different trades. And if you are interested in that, you should definitely check it out. And we hope you guys like this video. Subscribe if you can. And we really appreciate it. And we will see you next time. Thanks a lot.
Hang on. We've got 12 out of 13. And that should be the title of the video.
Well, let's do a video on that.